During a trip to the zoo with her newborn son, a mom shows her baby to a female gorilla on the other side of the glass. When the zookeepers notice her reaction, they scream in shock and immediately rush to take pictures. Emelina Austin could hear several people in the background murmur as she held her baby boy Canyon close to the glass for the gorillas to see. Canyon was asleep, completely oblivious to the female gorilla that was staring at him from a distance. As the gorilla ambled up to the glass, there were gasps across the room. "Oh my God, what is she doing? She should get her baby away from there." No one could understand why the new mother was so comfortable showing her baby boy to the gorilla. But Emma found their fear amusing. The thick glass wall would stop anything from happening, and since Canyon was too young to understand what happened around him, he wouldn't even notice if the gorilla reacted badly towards him. However, it looked like a bad reaction was the furthest thing from the gorilla's mind. She seemed to be incredibly interested in the human boy. Others in the habitat were also surprised by her actions and focused their attention on her. The gorilla tapped on the glass repeatedly and placed her palm on it, apparently trying to hold the hands of the 1-month-old baby sleeping soundly in his mother's arms. This had never happened before, and all the visitors fell into a trance looking at the sweet interaction between those two mothers of different species. The eventful meeting took place in 2021 when Emma and Michael planned to spend the day at Boston Franklin Park Zoo. It is home to more than 220 species of animals and a favorite location for the couple. That was where they first met, and they wanted to start creating memories of their young family there. This was the first trip they took since the arrival of their son Canyon. Taking care of him for the past month had been hectic and had taken its toll on the new mother, but having him in their lives was a bigger blessing than they ever expected. Emma and Michael made their way through the zoo and finally reached the Gorilla Grove. It was one of the most impressive facilities at the zoo. It was home to the western lowland gorilla family and had been renovated a couple months prior to give the gorillas more room to play in. Emma had visited the grove a couple times before it was renovated, and she looked forward to seeing the changes they made to the place. The Gorilla Grove was filled with vines and trees for climbing, as well as a cascading waterfall. It replicated the gorilla's natural habitat as closely as possible. The guide informed the visitors that the new grove came with its own foraging opportunities, which allowed the gorillas to hunt for their food throughout the day. Most of the gorillas tend to spend their time in the indoor area of their habitat, but today they were outside. The young ones played together and were often doted on by their mothers, while the male silverback gorillas relaxed in the shades and watched the visitors as they passed by. One of these gorillas was Kiki. She had been raised by humans for most of her life and taught how to be nurturing and caring. However, there was no denying her innate maternal instincts. Even before she had her own babies, she always went out of her way to look after the young ones of other members in the group. She was always seen caring for the infants, carrying them around and nurturing them just like their mothers would. This allowed the new mothers to rest, knowing that their infant was in good hands. One day, her role as a doting maternal figure became important to the survival of the gorillas in the zoo. When she was just 17 years old, the Gorilla Grove welcomed the first gorilla to be born in the zoo in its history. It was a female named Caius, born to 23-year-old Coco. It is important that infants stay close to their mothers for the first 6 months and are nursed for about 3 years before they are allowed to move around freely. However, the gorilla's mother had suffered complications during birth and was unable to deliver her naturally. when she recovered from the emergency C-section, she refused to nurture her baby and would get aggressive when the zookeepers tried to bring her closer. The infant faced several challenges when she was away from her mother and developed pneumonia soon after she was born. Her father stepped in to take care of Kia's, but she needed more care and attention than he could provide. One of the zookeepers offered to step into the role of Kia's mom and look after her, but 17-year-old Kika instinctively took the infant under her care. Despite not having any child of her own, she would bring the newborn to be bottle-fed by the zoo's animal care team before taking her back to the enclosure. Because of her care, Caius was nursed back to health and was properly integrated into life in the zoo. When Kiki began having her own infants, she would proudly show them off to visitors and never let them out of her sight. Her fifth and last baby, Pablo, was 7 months old at the time of Emma's visit and was still trying to find his way around the enclosure. For the first 2 months of his life, Kiki looked after him all day and didn't allow anyone near him. Pablo's father, Ketum, was still not allowed to touch his son 7 months later. Anytime he tried to, Kiki got aggressive and would pry her infant away from his father's hand. The zookeepers thought it was better for Kitambi to take a back seat and wait until Kiki was ready to give him access to their son. The zookeepers often joked that if a baby ever fell into the exhibit, Kiki would not want to give it back. That's just how maternal she was. But when such a terrible accident happened, they got to witness the full extent of Kiki's affection towards babies of any species. 5 years before Emma's visit, a young boy who came to the zoo over the weekend climbed over a box on top of a railing and fell onto the concrete floor of the enclosure. All 7 gorillas approached the frightened boy, and his parents shouted on the other side of the glass, asking for help. The boy began to cry, asking for his dad to come help him, but that didn't stop the gorillas from circling him. The largest male gorilla touched the boy curiously, causing him to take a step back until he backed himself into a corner of the enclosure, unable to do anything. By the time the zookeepers arrived, the 3-year-old boy had exhausted most of his energy crying and was almost unresponsive to their calls. The zookeepers were cautious about entering the enclosure when all the male gorillas were outside. Usually they waited till all the animals were resting indoors in case the gorillas felt threatened and became aggressive. Now they had to navigate the situation carefully to make sure no harm came to the young boy. As they contemplated what to do, Kiki came out of her resting place carrying her infant on her back. She took in the spectacle in front of her and soon realized that a human child had accidentally fallen into the habitat. The male gorillas were still around the boy, but she also noticed the crowd that had formed on the opposite side of the glass as they waited for what would happen. Kiki made her way through the bevy of male gorillas until she came face to face with the boy. His eyes were red and puffy and his clothes caked with dirt from when he fell. He was frightened by her presence but remained still and didn't utter a word. She looked out at the boy's parents who were silently praying under their breath. His mother looked at her with teary eyes, pleading for her not to harm her son. Kiki had just had her second infant and in her own way could understand the pain the boy's mother was feeling. In a split second, she cradled the boy in her arms. As she picked him up, the boy became unconscious. Kiki recognized his vulnerability and handled him with as much care as she could muster. She made her way to the entrance of the enclosure where zookeepers and paramedics were already there to attend to him. When the other gorillas attempted to follow her, they were sprayed with water to keep them away. She calmly handed the boy over to the zookeepers before returning to her own family. The boy had broken his hand and sustained several small cuts on his face due to the fall. He was hospitalized for 4 days before being allowed to go home, where he made a full recovery. Kiki risked her own safety to protect the boy from other territorial gorillas as she would her own offspring, and became an international sensation. She received special treats and attention from the zookeepers, and visitors flocked to the zoo, eager to catch a glimpse of the now famous gorilla. Emma and Michael were among them. While walking around the gorilla enclosure, they noticed a group of people curiously watching Kiki as she played with Pablo. She was oblivious to the crowd and focused her full attention on her child as the cameras clicked away. As a new mother herself, Emma could see how much Kiki cared for her son and appreciated the growing bond between them. After passing a quick look to her husband, Emma held out Canyon and placed him close to the glass window. She wasn't sure if Kiki would notice them, but she went along with it, hoping that the sight of the newborn would be enough to draw the attention of the female to them. For the next several minutes, Kiki continued to play with her son, passing glances at Emma and her little son. As much as seeing Canyon made her curious, the doting mother still didn't want to let her son out of her sight. But Emma wasn't ready to give up either. Her husband thought that they should move on, but she was certain that Kiki was interested in the baby and she wasn't just imagining it. She slowly pushed away most of the soft blanket covering Canyon and held up his little hand. Even though he was sleeping, his fingers curled around his mother's hand, causing her to smile. Emma tapped the glass, softly calling out to Kiki, and then placed Canyon's head close to the glass. That was enough to break the gorilla's focus. She slowly made her way over to the glass to take a closer look at the baby boy. She took in his sleeping face and made soft sounds to signal her happiness. Despite the barriers between them, both the physical glass and the fact that they could not communicate with each other in their own languages, the two mothers were still able to connect over the love they had for their children. Kiki sat on the ground and Emma followed suit, bringing her son closer to the glass again. Like she did before, Emma took Canyon's hand and placed it on the glass. In turn, Kiki placed her palm on the glass, wishing she could hold his hand. She kept pointing towards Canyon and looking back at the other gorillas, wondering why they did not share her fascination for the human child. Kiki made eye contact with the baby's mother before returning her gaze back to the child, recognizing that both of them had bonded over their maternal instincts. Kiki tried to lick Canyon through the glass as she would her own infant, and when she couldn't, she pressed her face closer to the glass before looking at Emma and her husband once again with a proud expression on her face. She talked to them with her hands, and when her daughters came to get her, she ignored them until they went away. It was clear that Kiki understood how precious the human baby was, and was genuinely excited that his parents brought him over for a visit. Pablo was sitting a few steps behind his mother, playing with the leaves on the floor. He was completely oblivious to the human child and the fascination that his mother had for him. Pablo was waiting for her to return to him, and until then remained completely detached from the visitors or the other gorillas in the enclosure. Kiki looked at her son before returning her attention back to Canyon. Since Emma had introduced Canyon to her, she wanted to return the favor. More than that, she wanted to show off her son, and the pride she had in him. He was Kiki's first son, and that first male baby gorilla born at the Boston Zoo. She made hand gestures toward the couple, and they stared at her confused, wondering what she meant. Soon, Kiki walked away, and Emma stared at her retreating back, wondering what went wrong. She was sad that Kiki was leaving, but still elated that she had spent a lot of time with them, and was clearly happy to see Canyon. Emma and Michael decided to move on and visit other sections of the zoo. As they said their goodbyes, Michael noticed that Kiki gestured at them, seemingly asking them to wait. As the couple watched the gorilla return to them, she noticed that there was something wiggling under her arms. It was Pablo, her youngest child. He was reluctant to meet the couple, but Kiki wasn't having it any other way. When she got to the glass, she placed Pablo on her leg and pushed him closer for the couple to see. Pablo stared at the couple curiously until his mother diverted his gaze to the still sleeping baby in their arms. Pablo might not have been interested initially, but Canyon had fascinated him just like he did Kiki. The infant pushed his face against the glass, itching for a closer look at the baby. He looked at his mother and pointed towards the baby. Kiki nodded in response and the two pressed their faces toward the glass once again, their noses touching together. Michael and Emma had tears in their eyes. They couldn't believe that they were part of this heartwarming moment. More visitors gathered at the location, drawing the attention of the zookeepers who wondered what was going on. When they arrived, they screamed at the sight in front of them. This was the first time Kiki was excited about a human child, and it seemed Pablo had already fallen in love with him as well. They helped the couple take pictures beside Kiki and her son and posted their story on social media. Several visitors that stopped by told the couple that they had never witnessed or experienced something so beautiful in the zoo, and thanked them for creating such a memorable moment for everyone. As they walked away, Kiki and Pablo continued to follow them beside the glass and watched them until the couple was out of sight. It wasn't every day that the gorilla connected with humans on such an intimate level, but this was something they were all going to remember forever. Michael later posted the video to Facebook, calling it one of the most amazing experiences he had ever had. He was happy that he and his wife decided to visit the zoo that day, and that Emma had insisted on drawing the attention of Kiki. It was a memory that they hoped to share with little Canyon when he was much older. In 2003, Emma and Michael returned to the zoo together with their 2-year-old son. When they got there, the couple looked around eagerly until their eyes fell on Kiki and Pablo, her youngest son. Pablo was now almost 3 years old and still spent most of his time playing around his mother. Kiki was relaxing under one of the shades, with her eyes following her son's every move. Emma tapped on the glass window and called out to Kiki. When she didn't respond, she called out again. Kiki looked over at the couple for a few minutes and remained in her position. The couple had hoped that Kiki would recognize them and they would get to reintroduce Canyon now that he was a bit older. As they contemplated what to do next, Kiki got down from her resting place and came towards them. She remembered. She stared at Canyon, who looked at her curiously. It had been a while since she saw them, but Kiki still couldn't believe how fast he had grown. She placed her hand on the window, and after much encouragement from his parents, Canyon did the same. Kiki placed her hand down and looked at Emma appreciatively before returning back to Pablo. The two mothers still remembered each other and their baby boys, and would forever be united by their love for their sons, regardless of their species. What an incredible story! Would you let your child bond with an animal? Do you think Kiki really remembered Emma and Canyon? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and see you in the next video.